call the meeting to order. Good.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Christina's running it in. You can do roll call.
You okay, Miss Susan?
Oh, yeah, I just had a little procedure done on my toe. No big deal.
That was good.
What?
That was good.
On Zoom, yeah. Was it an ingrown toenail or what was it? Oh, okay, just guessing. Are we on right now?
Yes.
Okay. Jerry, we're glad your toe's okay.
Oh,
Oh, thanks. Okay, so we have 3 board members here. Do we have other board members on Zoom?
Jen, and is Carol on Zoom?
Yes.
Okay. Hello.
Hello.
So we will move into item 4, which is discussion of district's strategic plan process and components.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, members of the board, we really appreciate you taking a chunk of your afternoon and evening to spend with us in this workshop. This has been a very collaborative effort. In the interest of time, I will present the majority of the information, but any questions you may have relative to anyone's job lane, if they're here, I'll have them answer. But this is the work of our principals, vice principals, SALs, directors, parents, students, community members. Everyone was involved in one way or another in this strategic plan. So I shared this presentation with you earlier so you could look at it ahead of time. And then I will just go through the presentation with you and the audience so that everyone has a really good idea of the process of our strategic plan and the outcome. And then for those of you who are live, we have added the 4 priorities to the wall and the main strategy. So maybe before you leave this evening, you can take a look at it from that perspective as well. And obviously it's a living document. Today does not signify the end, but the next stage. So just to keep our time rolling, I did put some time stamps to an agenda on the next page. And are they going to see? Okay. Yep. Mhm. Awesome. So Tim and I will be doing the change the slide dance throughout the presentation, but just an overview of the process and the priority selection to start, and then we will roll through the 4 priorities and then end on a discussion of our return to learn guide strategies that will continue when school resumes. We had talked about board meetings being a discussion here, and then I am going to bring up uniforms in case it's something that could end up on an agenda in July or August. So our strategic plan objective was to set district priorities based on stakeholder input and district data in order to strengthen operations, ensure employees, families, and students are working toward common goals, and to identify agreed upon strategies and resources necessary to reach those goals. Very similar to what Mr. Jacks did with his team when the last strategic plan was run through. It was really exciting to see, as I mentioned in a couple of board reports, that some of the strategies over here at that time have now landed in the strength column. So the work the district has done was fruitful. We've kept, I think, most of them folded into our strategies, and now we're focusing on some different priorities based on this set of interviews and need selection. So here's the strategic plan process overview. The first thing that happened was a comprehensive needs assessment. Instead of working in isolation and having our strategic plan be independent of the work that the grants management team does with all of the schools, we combined the comprehensive needs assessment that happens at the school level with the district comprehensive needs assessment. All campuses conducted an evaluation with the 6 principals of school improvement and the 34 indicators of an effective school that the Arizona Department of Education shares with us. The CNA teams at each school were led by a combination of site leaders, SALs, and teachers. The results were aggregated and shared in team meetings, and Shelley Eastman, Director of Grants Management, and myself attended each school's comprehensive needs assessment team meeting, so that we were also participants in that communication process. And you'll see the trending principles on the next slide. Then our district team conducted internal demographic scans and of our demographic information, community population, geography, grad rates, special program enrollments, the communities we serve, to see who is our audience or who are our customers. Have the populations that we serve changed in the last few years? And then standardized stakeholder interviews were conducted. After interviewers were trained in the interview process and data entry, and we want to thank Director Sherman. He was very instrumental in creating our interview tool so that it was standardized and it was easy to quantify the results. And then when our large team came together to review the results, it was really easy to see the trends. So we appreciate his work on that. During the stakeholder interviews, we included certified staff, students, support staff, parents, local government officials, and community members. And each team, the same group of people interviewed all the students, for example, and all the parents, so that the interviews were very consistent between interviewees. Our strategic plan team then reviewed 1,295 lines of data to look for response patterns. We had very good input from all of those different categories. And that was our first large stakeholder meeting where we had principals, and each principal brought several representatives from their school, and then all of our district folks also joined so that we could review all of those data and look at the perceptions. We also have looked at why teachers and families leave the district. Angela Moreski and her HR team have continued to interview not only teachers who leave the district, but you interview every classification, don't you, if they're available to talk about why they left?
Yes, not. And
Most.
getting to, yes, most.
Yes, most classifications, so that we see the trends of why people are leaving the district. And then the last piece of phase one is where we reviewed our current mission, our vision, our values, and our goals to see again if they are all aligned with our current population, our demographic scans, our special populations. And that process was amazing. Now, phase two is when we came together a couple of weeks ago, and I think some people have called it magical. It was a pretty magical day, I have to tell you. I don't know if you guys want to nod in agreement or disagreement, but we had a really spectacular day where we started pulling out the priorities and looking at our mission as a district, and then deciding what strategies we need to meet the priorities that were identified through this process. We conducted SWOT analysis, looked at our opportunities, strengths, weaknesses, and threats, and then developed strategies and actions, which is what we will be going over today. I really just want to pause briefly on the next slide, which is our mission slide. We really love the mission we've had all along to provide students with an educational foundation for lifelong success, but we decided to modify that based on the hours of conversations. We've had many hours of conversations about what is our purpose? What's the fundamental purpose that KUSD exists today? Post-pandemic, evolving needs, changing demographics, why are we here? And it's very similar to what we've said all along, but we really focused on language. What is the language of our mission statement? And so as you can see by looking at the slide, our mission statement going forward, once the board approves our strategic plan or gives us the proverbial nod, is KUSD welcomes all students on a learning pathway to informed and engaged citizenship. And where this comes from is we are really seeing a lack of engagement in the last couple of years. I think that would be number one. We talked about some of the threats that we face, and that would be students who are working, versus coming to school, students who are coming to school, but they don't see the value of the education in front of them. Having their minds on social emotional, threats or trauma instead of being able to shift into their thinking brain. All of those things are really challenging our ability to engage them. So we want to work on having kids be engaged. To be informed then is to make decisions. There's a lot of decisions to make in the world right now. It's really changing, and to understand what it means to think critically and make a good decision means to make an informed decision. And then obviously citizenship is where we're sending them. We're investing a lot of money in these kids. We calculated during one of our meetings, if it's approximately $5,000 per student per year, and they're with us preschool through 12th grade, that's 13 times 5,000. That's a taxpayer's investment in our future per child. And so what we want is a return on our investment, is our students to go forth into the world and be engaged citizens who are also informed. And then obviously welcomes all. I think we talked about the word all, that little 3-letter word all, basically all day, every day, anytime we met. It's just really about reducing variability, increasing inclusivity, and having all actually literally mean all, and not letting anybody fall behind or fall between the cracks or go unnoticed. It's important that we welcome them all. And that's the other thing about public school too, isn't it? That we don't pick and choose who comes to school with us. We welcome all of them. And so we just really want to focus on that piece, that regardless the campus, the community, the socioeconomic status, the intellectual ability, the challenges, we welcome them all. So that's the process that led us to this mission statement. Do you have any input on this or anything you'd like to see as far as
Do you have
editing?
the old one written down?
It's right there.
Up there.
To provide,
Oh,
to provide students with an educational foundation for lifelong success.
So I noticed that the safety component is no longer in this mission, whereas it was in our old one. Is there a reason for that?
It is. It's in our strategic goal initiative. So under staff and student well-being, we have physical safety and social emotional safety. It's still a priority.
All right, where is that one at? Have we not gotten there yet?
Yeah, we're not there yet. But
Okay.
yeah, the mission statement before was to provide students with an educational foundation for lifelong success. It doesn't specifically mention safety in the mission, but safety is a priority.
Okay.
Good question. Thank you. Yeah, that's one of the ones that scored probably the highest in our stakeholder interviews was safety. So we want to definitely keep that at the forefront and not let it fall behind. So you'll hear a lot about that on staff and student well-being. Anything else?
No, I
We
think
can-
it's good. I
We
think
can
that
keep it. We can modify it.
no, I think I'm jumping ahead. Jen had mentioned that, but I was wondering where the component, like number 4, where we talk about career readiness and college, but I'm assuming that's over there. So we'll get to that.
Yep. I just wanted to start off with kind of setting the stage in the context that we're continuing to work for all students. And I think more than ever that reducing variability is important.
Yeah, for sure.
So every student on every campus and every class has the same experience. Well, not the exact same, but the same accessibility to a high quality experience.
Becomes the never-ending conundrum of being able to teach with diversity for all
Right.
the variety of
Yeah, teachers have, when you have a group of 25 or 30 kiddos, you have 25 or 30 personalities and abilities and backgrounds, and we need to really support strategies in ways that is doable. Yeah. So a little bit more on the comprehensive needs assessment that I mentioned in the opening. This is perfect. Next slide. These are the 6 principles: effective leadership, teachers' instruction, organization of time, effective curriculum, conditions, climate, culture, and family and community engagement. Clearly, we work on all 6 of these. So when we choose our priority, it doesn't mean suddenly we're not interested in leadership, teachers, or instruction. We've got a really good process. Things are going in place well. But what did trend when we look at those 1,200 data points in interviews, our own achievement data, our own internal and external scan, was interesting. Principle 6 was clearly the winner, if you will. And I can show you if you're interested. I can have Tim G open the actual lines of data if you wanted to dig in a little deeper. That wouldn't be a problem. So you can see kind of the trends of answers and how communication surfaced. I'll talk about it, and then if you want to like look at the actual data, I would be happy to show you. I'll just have to get it. Are you open? Are you on your? Oh, Joe, that Robbie has it. So then Robbie could open it. So the first trend was family and community engagement, and what we really paused and talked a lot about is the difference between communication dissemination and meaningful two-way communication. Our parents and our teachers said there's not a lot of meaningful two-way communication. There are one calls and there are Facebook posts and there are newsletters on some campuses, you know what I mean, those kinds of things. But less often do we really pause and say, Charlie Lucero, let's talk about your family and your daughter and your needs. That's really what people are interested in hearing about. What is specific and unique to me and where do I fit into this? We heard from, community leaders. Not many people know what our priorities are. The last couple of years, we've kind of been busy doing other things and not as communicative as we should be. So really getting that message out there and then having that engagement. Aaron, I think you spoke to the local government and you had some great conversations with the city manager and a few of.
Yep, I mean, a big focus was the one, not really knowing what we're doing, that not reaching out, not having a collaborative team. And where we miss on that is that when they're trying to entice businesses into the city, especially in like the manufacturing area, those businesses are asking, how are we going to staff our company if we move there? And so a tighter connection with the government, and they know our priorities, and they know theirs, then you're able to actually help in that area. And that's what they were saying. It's just our lack of communication means missed opportunity.
Right. So after the trend in communication, then the second trend had to do with effective curriculum. It's not that we don't have great curriculum and we don't know our standards and we haven't adopted great resources, but there's a combination of two indicators under Principle 4 effective curriculum that talked about providing access to a well-rounded education that fully maximizes the potential of the education for all students. And really that all students piece started coming out again. And that curricula are accessible for all learners, including culturally relevant academic, behavioral, and social emotional learning components. So that SEL piece kind of surfaced, and then making sure all students had access to the curriculum and that it was consistent. Consistent was a word that we found pretty regularly. It happens here, but it doesn't happen there, or this school's reputation is this, but that one we don't know much about, and it might be a lack of communicating that school's curricula and accessibility versus them not having it. So it was clearly a priority that we've got to make sure, again, that we reduce the variability, that the curricula is accessible to all kiddos, and then the supports for teachers, that piece folds into that as well. This also further emphasizes our need for meaningful two-way communication with families regarding what's important to them. So letting them know this is the curricula, this is how it's accessible, and if you're struggling to have access to it, then there are supports in place. So, and then the third, Principle 5, is KUSD creates an environment which builds collaborative relationships among leadership, teachers, students, and families. Our teachers really are craving that another level or higher level of collaboration. I think they do well on their school sites with their leadership teams, but between school sites, they don't really know each other as campuses, one campus to another. There's not enough collaboration there. The district needs to continue seeking ways to collaborate. And then that includes with the students and the families. So all of these together, we've learned that families not only want to participate in what interests them, but they also want to know where their students are on their pathway to graduation. Just because they don't ask, I think that was an aha in some of our parent interviews. Just because they don't reach out and ask doesn't mean they aren't interested in knowing. That's really important to remember. Because they might just be sitting there thinking about how they don't know when we haven't reached out versus reaching out and asking. So we have to initiate that two-way communication. And then the fourth priority has been informally addressed, but not formally. And it evolved out of the communication piece and the learning pathways piece. And that is effective and transparent transitions, which I will talk about in great detail here in a little bit. All right, so that's the comprehensive needs assessment. I just want to show you a couple of the slides for information, and if anything pops out, you can ask questions. This is just a one glance look at our communities that we serve. So we are not, as everybody knows, we're not the typical, right, community. It's not Kingman. Even though we are Kingman Unified School District, we are serving the Kingman, Golden Valley, Meadview, Dolan Springs, Valley Vista, White Hills, and Butler, among a speckling of other little communities. There was the 2020 census wasn't out in early April when we had our first meeting and used this slide. And I know those numbers are out now. So this was the 2019 data. But you can see the populations from a mere 250 at White Hills to the largest in the Kingman area. And then the schools that reside within those boundaries. So you can, again, I'm preaching to the choir, but we are clustered in the Kingman area with access in Golden Valley, with Black Mountain and Dolan Springs with Mount Tipton, and then KHS, Surbat, and Little Explorers in the Butler area. The distance or square miles is how large that area is. So Kingman is 37 square miles. Golden Valley is 78 square miles. And then the distance for the kids who are 9-12 is up to 16 miles to Lee Williams. So it just further demonstrates how far our kiddos are traveling to get to school. You can see for Dolan Springs, they're 58 square miles. If you're preschool through 6th, you're okay, but then you're at least 37 miles from a 7 through 12 campus, either going into. And then we actually did do a little, Jerry Wellesley worked with transportation and put together a share sheet where they took every student who rides a bus, for example, to Lee Williams from an outlying area, how long that student is on the bus, what his or her attendance is, what his or her grades are, and how often, they're absent or in trouble. So we were looking for correlation. And as you would imagine, there's a pretty strong correlation between attendance and distance from school, especially the older they get. They make a choice just not to get on that bus in the morning, and then they miss school because they're getting on the bus at 5:30 in the morning. So we really looked at those kinds of needs. You can see our enrollment data from 21 in the parentheses, and then 20 outside the parentheses, the pandemic effect on populations by each campus. Dolan Springs was the only one that grew in population over this year. But you can see a range of Golden Valley, your population stayed pretty strong, Kim, to Wallapai and Surbat losing a significant number of their kiddos. And then we really talked about why they weren't at school, and then how we can meet their needs to help them feel comfortable in coming back. And then there's your Title I EL and SPED numbers. I did work with Mohawk County to get a list of homeschool kiddos, because one thing we want to know is where did those students go? We don't want any lost students. I know the state is working on where are they project. The kiddos who didn't go to school during the 2021 school year, and this is nationally, but Arizona is also working on it. If they're not in school and they're not registered as homeschoolers, where are they? We've got to get them back. So I did work with Mike Files' office to get a list of registered homeschool kiddos. And there were 166 K-12 kids registered during the 2020 school year with Mojave County. And we're going through each of those names in our synergy system to see if they were in any of our schools the year prior to leaving in the 2021. And then we will reach out and see how we can support them and how they're doing and if they're ready to come back to school. So the next
Question. So we haven't reached out as a district for the kids that are missing that were here in 2020.
We're starting that process.
Starting,
yes.
okay.
Many, some of them we have, some of them have contacted us. I'm going through the homeschool list and we're reaching out to those. Our parent liaison has, before she left, was making calls to see how's it going and where are you. Yes.
And what are you doing next year? Yeah.
And the principals, we gave you a list, didn't we, Kim, a few months ago, and had each principal reach out to the parent, to the kiddos that had withdrawn. We did what's called a loss gain report, where you can see the names of the kids you've gained and the names of the kids you've lost, and each principal was given that report and asked to reach out to those kids. So
It's just some of those percentages are scary. Like the
yeah, and it's based on numbers. So a smaller campus, it might, you know, take a more significant hit percentage wise. Fewer kids are a higher percentage, but like Serbat 726 to 607, that's pretty gigantic.
Yeah.
So Julie's, go ahead, Jen.
Had during our conversations and making decisions as a board, we heard from a lot of parents that were saying, listen, we don't feel safe, we're going to leave. So, I mean, this just makes sense to me.
Yeah, it does. And it's a nationwide trend. There were districts that were losing, you know, thousands of kiddos. So we've got to get them back so that they know we're still here for them.
Well, that's why that safety component is really
Yep.
going to be important.
Totally agree.
When looking at the enrollment, I was looking at Kingman High School, and I know they had problems with the students coming to school, but yet the percentage is rather low there as far as how many they've lost. So I'm assuming that they're enrolled one way or another.
Yes, but absent.
But absent.
Yes.
So we
Yes.
really don't know what's going to come of that.
We had in the 2019-2020 school year, when we were doing our attendance studies, kind of backed off on pressuring people to come because of the COVID situation, but we were at a 22% chronic absentee rate district-wide the year before the pandemic, which is 22% of the kids are gone 10% or more of the time. And that reached into the probably, I think, the 30s this last year for chronic absenteeism. Really significant. At the high school level, they were, and we have a high school teacher, I would ask Joe, you had significant attendance issues, right? And what were the students telling you as far as the reasons they weren't coming? Yeah, employment. Didn't feel like it. Yeah. Right. So one thing we've talked about is working with employers. Jerry Woolsey, she's a member of the chamber, and she talks to the chamber board about, can we work with employers to stop scheduling kids during the school day? And there are some things that our community needs to work with us so that we aren't competing with those work hours, but we also have to understand that those kids need to work. So all of that will go in, you know, to our strategy planning going forward.
Well, it's also, I mean, you've got some students that go to the academy and they have a different spring break, different schedule. You also have some K-12 students who can manage their week. So it would be not just not employ those students during school hours, because what you really mean is during KUSD school hours. And that would be an individual
Right.
school
Student.
conversation, which is a
Right.
little bit more difficult.
It is. And what we were doing was board member Shumway friendly calling, because we didn't want to, create a bad situation for a student either. Call their employer and say, hey, stop scheduling them, then they lose their job. And they need that money, that economic income for their family. But friendly calls to kind of work together. And then the other thing that we have to be willing to do is look at alternate schedules for our kiddos as well. There's going to be a lot when it comes to high school and bell times and graduations and how to get them there. So speaking of graduation rates, we did look at our graduation rates as well. At the time, we only had the 2019 rates, and then if you look parallel to the word rate on the first row, I guess it's green on yours. That we did get the 2020 rates, graduation rates, so I popped those in there before today. Kingman High came up 4 points, which is really good. Obviously, that's still lower than we would like. But what was kind of shocking to look at was the female to male graduate rate at Kingman High. You can see it's lower for KUSD and statewide, female to male grad rate. So that tells us that and it kind of correlates with what we know, those chronically absent kids are more often males, and they're less likely to graduate. And we do pick some of them up in 5 years, but we've really got to now drill down with that subgroup and find out what is keeping them from graduating, and then align strategies to that. But I think if you look at the state 78.9, when we get Kingman High up, and I think Isaiah Ward is doing a great job heading us in that direction, we'll be at or above the state average. So there is good news there.
So I'm curious with the 4-year versus the 5-year.
Mm-hmm.
Are those 4-year students versus 5-year students?
Yeah.
Or the 5th year, are we including that you follow them and you find out they got their GED later?
No, not their GED.
Okay.
Yeah, so those would be kiddos that didn't quite get it done in 4 years, so they returned that fall or the entire year of the next year.
Okay.
And we appreciated when they added that 5-year graduation rate a number of years back, because 4 years for some of our kids is not enough time. It's kind of like some of our children when they go to college and they don't get it their freshman year, and then they end up being a longer. Yeah, it's that same. But I did read a study recently, a few days ago, that kind of confirmed what we know about freshmen, and if how you do in your freshman year is completely signals whether or not you're going to graduate. Not for every child, but the number of courses you pass your freshman year is really highly correlated to how you end up doing your senior year in graduation. So we've got to spend a lot more time looking at our freshmen, who's being successful and who's not, and even more importantly, and I'll talk about this during some of the priority conversations, how are we doing with our 8th graders, and are we just funneling them on whether or not they're ready? If we don't do a solid job in 8th grade, and then they arrive at 9th grade, and then they struggle as 9th graders, we are literally setting them up for failure or not graduation as seniors. So we're going to be talking about some early warning systems and some other ways that we can.
The top number is 2019, then it goes to 2020?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I added that green or the 2020, the
Okay.
parentheses one, a few days ago when we got the new data. I talked to Victoria Edwards today, just briefly. She popped in for me to sign something, and she said that Lee Williams, for this year, kind of maintained their average, and it looks like Kingman High will be up at 70. So again, another increase. We're excited about that forward progress.
I was curious too. This is the spring of the pandemic for 20.
No, well, yeah, last spring, yeah.
Yeah, and so we still increased our graduation numbers even in the pandemic. Graduation didn't happen.
It probably didn't hurt that nothing really counted in the fourth quarter of their senior year. Probably didn't hurt. So
Yeah, they just started in March.
yeah, and when I
Right.
say nothing didn't, they were still doing work. The counselors were still working with them. They probably worked harder than they ever had. But we, the governor said they couldn't go backwards.
What about the difference in the high school rates? That's a huge gap there.
Mhm. Yep, we're working with Kingman High to identify their subgroups. Like we said, one of them is male. I think that even their female Kingman High to Lee Williams is low, but the male is drastic. A lot of that, if you kind of go down, they're white and Hispanic and low income. Kind of stick with their 62%. They're not too far off. The students with disabilities is a little lower, but remember, and I think Vicki can answer this question. If they decide to stay until they're 21, does that affect graduation rate? Right. And it will affect their graduation rate. So they do have the population of kiddos that stay longer with those special district programs. That could be a piece of that 59% there. And then the American Indian piece, the kids, there's between 70 and 80 that come from Peach Springs, very, very chronically absent and very low graduation. So we are working with the tribe in the Peach Springs area to look at ways where we can increase our collaboration and perhaps have some satellite programs so that they're not coming to us, but we're going to them, so that they would have a better access and better chance at graduation. So there's a lot of moving pieces in that KHS graduation.
So there in 2019, their rate was 37.5, their graduation rate.
Mhm.
I'd be curious as well to see discipline rates,
Yes.
percentages.
It's about,
that
it's very high, Ms. Shumway.
Yeah, I mean, we know that males tend to have more write-ups in disciplinary action, even when the behavior with males and females could be similar. The disciplinary action tends to be higher. So
Correct.
I'd be curious to see if we have a correlation between those that have higher discipline and like, all right, I'm done, I'm not coming, and how that might affect attitude, but also if those correlate to the lower income or to the different other groups there.
Yes, I did do that study last year. I didn't do it this year because attendance was so, variable. It was hard to really find patterns, but you're very right. And I would love to put that study together for you, where we looked at percentages of like long-term suspensions and those going to hearings correlated to their attendance, and then, dropout rates. And we looked at by area, by male, by female, and you're right, the males are way ahead of the females, but possibly they get caught for different reasons and more often. There's a lot that goes into that. And when we look at like some of the strategies and we talk about restorative justice, and then the other ways we're going to have early warning signals so that we don't funnel them down that pathway, that's a concern to me. We know it's happening. We know what the indicators are. We know what the early warnings are, and it happens anyway.
So that'd be kind of interesting if you're able to correlate. I don't know if you can really measure how many students are in any SEL type of program, or in identified as needing that, and correlating it to the graduation rate, correlating it to the discipline rate.
Well, I'm excited to tell you guys. I'm going to look over at Rob and Tim G here for a minute. Tim G, you'll never see because he's behind the camera, but he's amazing. We are working with, and I'll mention it in a little while, on Decision Ed. I think, Roger, did we start that right when you were leaving the spring? I think you might have been on board when that getting going. It's finally coming to fruition where we're going to have an early warning dashboard. We're meeting, I think, next week to talk about what are the indicators. And there's a piece about SEL, about migrant, about special ed, about gender, about achievement, about attendance. And then the algorithm of the program will put parameters to it. So we will identify what's a chronically absent student, who has, SEL or trauma in their life, what are achievement benchmarks, and then there'll be an algorithm that scores it. And then kiddos will be identified for us as low risk or medium risk or high risk, I believe. Is that what it was, Rob? Yeah. And so Tim G is working with the IBM Decision Ed folks to build those dashboards for us, to do all of those correlation studies immediately. And it will upload every night so that it will always be real time. And then someone will be responsible for monitoring it and not just saying, oh, look, there's some at-risk kids. We got to say, oh, look, there's some at-risk kids. Here's what we're going to do with them and for them. It's a really big step. We're really excited about that.
And some of those, like the Native American Indian, 37.5%, a lot of those could be due to cultural challenges too. Do we have people in the district who can work with those students that have the same cultural similarities?
We don't have, we are working with a gentleman named Leon. I can't think of his last name. He is the most amazing advocate. He does work and live in the Peach Springs area, but he's working with our PAC team, Positive Alternative Campus, and Kingman High, since that's the zone for those kids, to figure out how to mentor them and get them those resources, Charlie, Dr. Lucero, because they're not all here. And so we may need to meet them where they're at versus trying to get them into Kingman all the time. And there's also a new superintendent at Peach Springs. I'm really excited about him because he wants his kids back. The prior superintendent really didn't want to serve any more than the K-6, maybe K-8 population. So we got a lot of the middle school and the high school. And we love those kids and they are a value added to our community and our campus, but they're riding the bus for such lengths of time. They don't want to get on the bus in the morning. So we gotta do we have to meet them where they're at.
Do you have any plans to put together any peer mediation or peer mentoring? We talk about finding adults in the culture, but we have those students and they speak each other's language. So I think that would be a better use of mentoring.
Yeah, I met with a young lady at Kingman High School. I will never forget her for the rest of my life. I think she was a junior, and she was from Peach Springs, very proud of her culture, very articulate. And she said exactly that, Board Member Shumway. She said, we're here. She was so honest, you need to see us and recognize the diversity and the needs. And then she said, and you need to put us together.
Excellent.
She was talking about having student support systems on the campus in addition to the adult support systems. And I just thought that she just was brilliant. And I told her I was going to come back and put her in charge of it with some support, but she really got it. And she said exactly that. And no, I don't think we do enough of that at all. So you can see, I love this. This is exactly what happens to us when we get together and we look at it and we want to do what we're doing and just really dive in and ask questions and then look for the research-based practices without we can't just shotgun all of a sudden have 100 new strategies. We got to look for the trends and make it purposeful. So that's what we did next. When you look at the strengths, and this is of our surveys among all those cohorts or demographic groups, school safety, which I was really surprised, especially during the pandemic, came out about 95% of respondents when asked about feeling safe at school said yes. Now, a lot of that has to do with the priority that we talked about before. Ensuring student safety remains KUSD's #1 priority. And some of it had to do with the pandemic. We did have a number of interviewees, parents, who said, you know, they chose to have their students online because they didn't feel safe pandemic wise, but overall felt safe. We had the kids, Miss Woolsey and I did all of the student interviews. We had such a great time. She took the littles and I took the bigs, and we interviewed a lot of kiddos, and almost every child we asked, what do you like about school, said, I like the teachers and the relationships that we make with our teachers. It was so awesome to hear all of those good reports. So that was a strength. Parents, most groups reported that we are really good at passing out information. So that's a strength because that's important too. We need to pass out information. We need that one call system. We need flyers. We need information, but the other half of that fell into the other category. And then we heard a lot about infrastructure and organization of services being a strength, the different departments, special ed department and finance department and HR department. And then a lot of dedicated employee conversations. So those, there are more than that, but those were the trends. Our opportunities come from what we heard people are craving or what needs to happen. And so we did hear a lot about guaranteed academic and social emotional curriculum. And that's where it's happening here, but not there. Like we want every parent might say, well, my cousin, somebody is getting it at that school, but we're not having it at my school. And so an opportunity is to build that consistency in. There's another opportunity is to increase two-way communication events. We heard, like Erin mentioned earlier, we heard from local government, we heard from business leaders, we heard from parents that they want two-way communication events. They like coming to the school events. It's great to come to open to choir concerts and awards assemblies, but they also want to come to events where they're interacting. That's an opportunity. We really learned there's an opportunity to define our milestones. So does everyone in our community know what it means to be a K-3 student, a 4-5? I mean, we know generally, but what's really happening in those grade spans? And then what are the unique needs during those milestones? And then another opportunity was to look at our recruitment and retention patterns based on needs. So we work a lot on recruitment and retention, but are we focusing on those reasons they're leaving that we will have Ms. Moreski help us with? Now, what is a weakness? Well, the weakness led to those opportunities. We are weak in two-way communication. We are not consistent across every campus and every grade level with that instructional and emotional environment. We don't necessarily, we all know our milestones and our transitions, but we've got to stop assuming everybody knows and then communicate it. And then staff recruitment and retention in some job areas. For example, we are really, really struggling with the paraprofessional jobs, right? Vicky's reporting on a daily basis. I think it's 20 openings right now in paraprofessionals. Angela is really working hard to find substitute teachers. We've got to look at recruitment and retention in every classification in addition to teacher classifications. And then a weakness is, I say resources because that's what came out on our SWOT analysis when our team was together, but they didn't mean resources as in how finance is managing our budget. They meant resources as in like human resources, like substitutes and paraprofessionals and unfunded mandates, like EL mandates and other things that are expected that aren't funded. So we're weak in resources with some of the things we have to do, not necessarily weak in resources for our budget. What are our threats? What is keeping us, or what could possibly or potentially keep us from being successful? Our competing schools. I mean, micro charters are just blowing up, right? I think Facebook must listen to my office conversations because every time I get on Facebook, I literally I could open it right now and probably show you 5 or 10 advertisements for charters, micro charters, or online schools. They're opening constantly. And why that's a threat is because they're customizing what they offer based on family needs. That's not a terrible thing, but it's definitely a threat. We are threatened by a lack of district-wide structure that may lead to inconsistencies. Well, a strength was having infrastructures and organizations. A weakness is that we're not consistent with the application of that structure at all campuses. I don't want to hear, and I know Roger and I talked about this when we were working together, that one school feels they are not as valued or supported as another school. So we've got to make sure that the weakness, if the root cause is communication, because I know they're not funded differently, they're not resourced differently. Aaron does the budgets equitably. So what is causing that inconsistency? That's a weakness we need to figure out. And then I talked about the other resource or threats. And then students choosing other things from school. How do we meet their needs? Because our community is different. And then it's a threat if we continue to be non-responsive to evolving community needs. If the community evolves, the needs evolve, the things that our families are looking for or need to be successful evolve, but we just keep, our head in the sand and going forward, then we won't be successful. So that's a quick summary of our SWOT analysis. And I'm going to start with the priorities unless you have comments and questions you want to.
Just when you were talking about the district-wide consistency, we know that the weakness is the human factor, right?
Right.
Which then leads to training, and I'm sure you've talked about that.
Yeah. Yeah, human factor and perception. If we just allow that perception to continue without filling in the gaps, and imaginations fill in the gaps to that human piece as well. Roger?
Well, starting with this next section, did you have conversations about staff and student well-being being priority 1 versus priority 2? Kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, we kind of went in the order that it's not scientifically, but trend-wise, we kind of just went in the order of trend, and we could certainly move that, to priority 1 and make communication priority 2. We just heard more about communication than we heard about well-being.
Which makes sense when we consider that the safety factor is not.
Right. But I don't want to insinuate that communication is more important than safety. We just heard about it more often, so that's a good point. Any other thoughts on that? I think it's perfectly appropriate. We could put staff and student well-being first. Equitable access to learning and communication and transitions, they go together. Like I didn't even number them up there. I just sort of left them all equal because we haven't done that part yet.
That's the way I was looking at it too. Is it doesn't matter how you number the priority. They're all priorities. They flow.
Right, but I think you do make a good point. If someone's reading it in order that puts it in order, then that may make it look like that's more important than the other. Well, priority 1, maybe priority 2 then. The first one we'll talk about. Yeah, I think that's a great point, Roger. Thank you. The way this flows, we did a lot of work on what we value in our groups, because what you value kind of signifies how you behave. And again, this is all a living document. This is me presenting, and then we've gone through all the other stakeholder groups. Now it's the board members' turn to add or modify to anything that we're saying. But because we value communication, inclusion, diversity, and teamwork, our vision includes, for communication and collaboration, engaging in meaningful and inclusive communication, highlighting inclusive, because that's the part we're going to really work on improving, about what is important to stakeholders by building responsible partnerships. The word responsible was added in by one of our principals when we were meeting because he felt like you can have partnerships, but you need a responsible partnership so that all of the stakeholders in that relationship have meaning, which means our parents have work to do also. We have work to do, our parents have work to do, our community board members have work to do. We talked about, if there's a shift in the economy and the jobs, it's okay for them to also approach us. It needs to be a two-way. And with family, schools, and the community. So the initiatives, and the way we drove this plan, we just kind of took what happened before, and then, for example, if I'm comparing it to the plan that we're launching from, we kind of took each of those strategic goals and then added our initiatives. That happened last time too. I'm just articulating the initiatives that go along with each of those strategic goals. So the initiatives under communication and collaboration then are to collaborate with key stakeholders to host, organize, and execute special events and activities to increase awareness and promote action. The key word being promote action. So as stated during the CNA principal trends, communication was the #1 priority. The key is understanding what kind of communication our stakeholders want. So we discussed the difference, as I mentioned before, between dissemination of information and valuable, meaningful information that is discussed in two ways. So the first initiative brings our community and our district families together. For example, and I'll just give you a few strategy examples for each initiative. July 6th and 7th, Director Eastman, Trujillo, and Coordinator Stout are organizing what's called a Braided Family Expo, a back-to-school family involvement fair, where parents can meet with, not just walk by and see, but meet with and talk with district representatives on enrollment, vision hearing, services to meet unique needs, the food services, CTE, COLA, Cambridge Gifted, Positive Alternative Campus, Child Find, FIT, EL, Migrant Families, SEL, all of it in a one-stop shop, and some of our community members. Last year they hosted a smaller version of this and had 200 families come. I think this year we're hoping to double that so that they can see everything we have to offer before school, the back to school event. And then during that back to school event, there will be dialogue with all of those participants to find out their needs in addition to showing them how we can meet it. So that would be one example of a special event to increase awareness and promote action. There are others. I can't begin to go through everything, but these are samples. A second initiative is to execute consistent and meaningful two-way communication with parents and guardians regarding their individual needs, goals, and progress. So kind of, we have parent-teacher conferences, and we do expect teachers and administrators to call parents, but we want to take that a step further. For example, when we have parent-teacher conferences, perhaps having a standardized parent conference where the teacher can have his or own unique perspective, but also maybe there are 2 or 3 key questions that every family is asked. And then we can look at the answers to those questions to meet their unique needs. We're also going to continue the stakeholder interviews, with Darren's help, where maybe semi-annually X number of families focus groups are called so that we can again check in on the needs of our parents, making it systematic and purposeful so that we don't just assume. We're getting rid of the word assume. We don't just assume everyone's out there calling our parents. We are actually logging and documenting standardized conversations that are also personal and meaningful. Recognize and celebrate students, families, teachers, schools, community members committed to pursuing excellence. Celebrations are important. We all know that. And we have awards assemblies, and we will always continue with, the traditional recognitions, but we are also going to be writing a training and recognition guide, again, to get away from assuming what's happening. And we will have recognitions for all of our initiatives that are happening. We might have a counselor who's doing an outstanding job with small group and individual counseling. And we're going to make sure that we're accountable to not missing any opportunity to celebrate the good things that are going on. And not just what we have found in some of our interviews is it's nice to be recognized in the traditional award ceremonies. I knew my children were going to get their honor roll every quarter. I plan to go. But when an unexpected recognition, those are the most important. Research says when you're recognized for some of the special or even ordinary things that you're doing that are making a difference, that those recognitions matter most. So we tried to start the Spotlight Award, and we started making some momentum on that last year, and then like a lot of things, it went on the back burner, but we're going to make sure that happens. And if you were to walk around and look over at the recognition strategy list, you'll see some other examples of how we'll do that. The final initiative on communication and collaboration is to coordinate systems of aligned messages designed to promote procedural, resource, situational, and impact information. So we we have offered the position of communications manager to someone. Actually, if you turn around, Cara Maple is back here. We did the interviews, and I emailed you about her, and you will hopefully ratify her at the July board meeting. But she's really right now. She works for KUSD already. She works for Desert Willow as a computer teacher. She's helping us conduct a communication audit. So she's really taking a deep dive into what are our procedural resource avenues, what are the resources that are communicated to the families and community. How do we communicate situational information, events and things that are going on. And then the impact information is, what impact are we making in the community? What are the successes that we're having? How are we marketing ourselves? So when she completes that audit, then we'll share with you her findings and then some of our strategies going forward. But we do know if we have a system of aligned messages, and parents kind of said that, parents said that to us in our interviews as well. They're like, my third grader, it's this message system, and my seventh grader, it's that message system, and my high schooler, it's totally different. And I'm trying to juggle all these varieties of message systems. And so when it becomes big in a busy life, then they just stop doing it. So if we are consistent and aligned and the messages are coming in a familiar format, then it might make it to the parents more often. So that's part of what we learned on that one. Any questions on this priority? So as you know, we've talked, the next priority we'll talk about is staff and student well-being. Because we value compassion, being compassionate and attentive and responsive to all staff and students, our vision includes committing to a district-wide focus on providing services that address the 4 pillars of staff and student well-being: the physical, emotional, intellectual, and relationship needs. So that physical piece is the continuation of what we've been working on. The emotional, intellectual, and relationship, it's kind of neat that is a strength that was identified during our strategic planning process. But again, it may not be consistent. So we're going to put that system to it. So our initiatives are to implement research-based ESSA approaches designed to address evolving emotional, intellectual, and relationship needs. And the reason we decided the term evolving is important is because, as we just learned, lots of needs evolved over the last year. And so they may be different than they were even a year ago. So we've got to be mindful of evolving needs. 1980s problems and 1990s problems may not be 2020s problems. So this year, as a part of our strategic plan, we're going to launch a comprehensive program in addition to some of our already available services. Teachers will receive continued training in the areas of neuroscience, mindful awareness, SEL, and positive psychology. Understanding and then making decisions based on the science behind addressing fears and threats will then positively change the classroom management and achievement environments. To promote equity and accessibility, all schools will provide instruction using a district-adopted curriculum and expectation guide. We already know at this point that Mind Up for Life, and I can send some links for you to take a deeper look. Jerry has it on the, you've been looking at it as a board, it's on display. But Mind Up for Life will be the curriculum for K-8, and all teachers will receive training in the Mind Up for Life curriculum, and they're very simple. What is it, 8 to 11 minutes, a few times a week lessons, but they're very science-based on how to recognize what you're feeling, process your reaction, and then there's some curriculum also for counselors and small group counseling. Our district social worker that we have offered a position to, and you will be ratifying at the July board meeting, along with the SEL committee, which has representatives from every campus, will drive this initiative. So Vicki and Shelley are running the social emotional learning committee. There's a counselor and another representative, an administrator from every campus on the district committee that will drive the training and ensure that there's consistency across every campus. Are you so excited, Beth? So we're excited about the social worker addition to our district. And then, of course, we will also remember that one of our highest scoring areas was that staff members build relationship with students already. They're already engaging them in wonderful classroom environments, and we want to be sure to continue to celebrate those teachers that are doing that. The new components will just enhance these programs and then increase access for all kiddos consistently. Devin Catron, our facilities manager for that second initiative, monitoring school safety, we're going to continue exactly as the district has been doing all along. He will continue monitoring school safety to make sure all staff and students have access to physically safe learning environments. Our safety committee will resume in July. We are currently auditing and updating our emergency response plan, something that district does annually. And we're super excited about having Devin work with this because we get positive reviews on Mr. Catron everywhere we go. So Ms. Shumway, that is continues to be one of our priorities. This is where we talk about that piece. We're also going to implement district-wide systems to identify unique needs that may affect staff and student well-being. Those might be special needs, indicators of failing. I talked about decision ed in the early warning system. Giftedness, we're really focusing on that. We've asked Margaret Smith, our Cambridge coordinator, to also be our advanced learning coordinator to ensure gifted testing and services are equitable across all campuses. She's going to look at the curriculum, how we cast the net, make sure that we're not missing out on any opportunities for any kiddos.
May I add in there?
Yeah.
The idea that too often kids that are identified as having special needs are
Are
not
gifted.
tested for gifted.
Right.
Yeah.
She's really, Margaret's very excited. She's on vacation right now, finally, where she would be here. She's the perfect person to be taking on that niche. We'll also continue, as Ms. Eastman has been talking, we do have migrant students in our district. We're doing research on that and all the other kinds that may not be listed in here, but the unique needs. So the priority of staff and student well-being will continue. Let me make sure. We will also continue. Mrs. Trujillo has been working on our LST. You always have to remind me the LST stands for. The Learning Support Team. She's written a new handbook for Learning Support Team. She's retraining all of the groups to make sure that the learning support teams at every campus are taking a look through the same filter and perspective for every student. With Fidelity, we're looking at auditing our response to intervention process. That would be our K-3 student achievement, reading achievement leaders to make sure our kids are, the teachers have the support and we have everything in place for that process. I talked about decision ed already, so I won't go over that again, but we'll continue to look at enrollment, attendance, behavior, and academic performance and look for correlations there. Okay. Priority 2, any suggestions, Mr. Jacks?
I just think those are really well written.
Good, thank you.
It's very well done. Speaks for itself. I like that a lot.
Good. Right. Priority next, we're not numbering them. I love that. Equitable and accessible learning environments, which is very similar again to one that we already have. develop each student's potential and support student and college and career readiness. Continuing with that again, because we value engagement, confidence, innovation, and reflection, and those are attributes of learners who are successful. Our vision includes building school and district systems that lead to engaging and relevant learning opportunities. We talked about engaging earlier, that we've got to really work on engaging today's learner and supporting today's teacher. And then we also need to work on that relevant, because they're making choices. If it's not relevant to them, they're staying home or checking out. And so how can we support every teacher to give them the materials and the training to help them with that relevancy piece? To drive these initiatives, again, you're going to see some crossover. We want to continue to recruit and retain highly effective staff, because we need highly effective staff in every seat in the district to ensure all students. And notice most of the time when we write the word all, it's capitalized, because that is our key word. All means all. To have access to high quality instructional environments. So providing a guaranteed curriculum, or that one and the next one, providing a guaranteed curriculum means reducing variability across classrooms. That started when we adopted Beyond Textbooks. That was one of the main strategies and initiatives at that time, was to ensure every student in every classroom on every campus was introduced to the standards and had an opportunity to master them. We have found that variability has increased again. It may be used with fidelity in some campuses and not so much with others. So we really have to work again to make sure our curriculum is guaranteed. That doesn't mean we tell teachers how to teach or how to make their lessons fun and engaging. It just means the curriculum. And then, for example, a fourth grade teacher should all have a deep understanding of their grade level standards, the objects, the performance level descriptors, and then research-based practices. This, in addition to understanding and building an engaging instructional environment, will give students access to similar standards and opportunities for successful acquisition. So we will continue to celebrate individuality, and that means what each teacher brings to the table. We don't want identical lessons and creativity, but we do want high expectations and equitable access. So we'll be continuing that standards-based guaranteed curriculum process. And then common formative assessments. We're kind of excited about a pilot program that Jerry and Academic Services went through this year to find a combination curriculum / assessment. So as you know, we're going through iReady reading and iReady math. And iReady reading replaces Dibbles. So Lisa's smiling over here. No more Dibbles testing, Dibbles monitoring. That's been something teachers have been talking about for years. Instead, we'll have that digital assessment that teachers are trained on, a lot less time in assessment so they can have a lot more time in instruction. And then the program that you're assessing with turns around and progress monitors, right, and delivers some curriculum. So
there's a crossover here that I'm excited about too, as far as communication.
mm-hmm.
The consistency in the curriculum, that a parent knows at the end of second grade, their kids should be able to read this. Yeah. And the teacher's in line, the student's in line, the parent is prepared.
Yeah, we talked about that too, Beth. What does it mean to be a kindergartner heading into first grade? Any kindergartner that leaves any kindergarten should have what skills? And that's what we're really talking about right now. We have a share sheet the principals are all putting their information on, and I don't want to hear that school A, you only need 25 sight words to be considered a successful kindergartner, and school C is 100. Like, what's our consistent and common expectation? And it needs to be a high expectation.
Well, and then stop the social promotion, because if everybody knows what's expected, then hey, if you didn't meet this minimum, then don't be surprised that you have to do it again.
And then how do we support teachers in that early warning system who have that variety of learner levels, so that there are supports for them when the teachers say, hey, I got a big group here and they are not meeting the expectation? Then we can say, this is our response and this is how we support you. It's going to be a really,
And how are we
Yeah.
supporting?
go ahead.
How are we supporting the exceptional? How are we supporting special ed with these combative formatives? How are we supporting gifted? Do we have a process in place? I mean, sometimes there's a reason, that there is some, I wouldn't say less, but definitely higher expectations. How are we supporting that?
You mean are the common formative assessments might look different for gifted. It won't be every child in the 3rd grade with the exact same thing. But like, what are our expectations for 3rd grade accelerated students? Are they different from one school to the other? And are we looking at those through a common formative assessment lens? And the same thing for special ed. And that's exactly what we have to work on, Jen, is what is our response? If we have kiddos who are in resource classes, for example, and in one resource class on one campus, they work at the student's ability level, and then we force that student to take a benchmark, which is different, a little bit different than the classroom assessments I'm talking about. They have no chance of doing well on it because they've never worked at anything above their level. And then in another classroom, they might be exposed to those grade level standards and they have more of a chance. We've got to look at the inconsistencies in instruction that might lead to the difficulties in the common formative assessments.
Well, and I think there's a misconception about quality versus schedule.
Right.
Some classes may move faster through one standard or piece of curriculum and slower through another. It's not that they aren't all reaching the expectation, they just aren't on the same schedule. So I think there has to be something built in to allow for quality and the time that's necessary for some students. I know we have to hit formatives, I think it's quarterly or something like that, but I think that there has to be something built in for those students or teachers, like I did project-based learning, that, I would never assess something maybe 2-3 weeks in because we're still building foundation. But by 5 weeks in, we've hit almost all of the standards for that quarter.
Right.
So there has to be that communication option for the way that how those teachers teach.
Right, and that's going to be the onus of the instructional leader on the campus. So there's 2 pieces to that, in my opinion. Having worked many years as the assessment director, I agree with you that a quality teacher who's doing project-based learning and they're really attending to the specific needs of those students could look different or might hit the baseline at different time periods. But I can also tell you that one of the most frustrating conversations I had ad nauseum over and over was when we would look at data and I heard over and over again, we haven't done that yet. We haven't taught that yet. I think we can get caught in a really tricky cycle of we haven't taught that yet. You know what I'm saying? Versus.
Oh no, I understand for sure.
There's quality education going on, and I can say your kids are going to get there because you can show me the data based on your projects and what's happening. So
That's right.
I'm separating formative assessments a little bit from benchmarks. We've got to do the benchmarks, and that is common baseline across the board. But the common formative assessments that I'd like to see happen are within the PLCs at the schools. So the 4th grade teachers, they know their standards. It's a guaranteed curriculum. We know the baseline and we have a high expectation. But within that PLC, then they can talk about pacing and differences and what they've mastered and what they have planned next. So yeah, I'm with you. It's bigger than just a blanket statement.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm happy to work with you on that because I know you love this area. So we can get together. We can get together on that.
That sounds great.
Okay. So moving on, we've got the digital instruction. Again, this is another piece that comes from the current strategic plan. And boy, did we learn this year, didn't we? What we know and what we don't know. We've had a lot of teachers that were excited about it and really ran with it this year, and were thrilled and did not want us to go back to live instruction. And we had others that were really needing a life preserver, which is normal. I mean, there's a spectrum, but we will guarantee some level of digital instruction in the next phase, where we provide teacher training and access to technology at all campuses. One of our goals with ESSER 3, if and when that happens, is to really, the dream goal is to have that 1-to-1 technology ratio. And I know Aaron and Robbie are working on that, but then have training that's commensurate with that. And then obviously we've added COLA for people who want to go totally digital, but we will not let go of our digital momentum, but we just won't do it in a desperation manner like we had to do and stress our teachers out. We'll work with them and alongside them instead of dumping it all at once. So, and then we also want to again engage all students as invested participants. So we really are excited about our school that's going project-based learning. Desert Willow is going to be a primarily project-based learning campus. But another one of our strategies is to encourage project-based learning growth on all campuses. I know Surbat Elementary is really kind of heading that direction. And then training all of our schools on service learning projects, at least at a minimum. And that's the invested in the community part. What service learning projects can every campus adopt? So kiddos, students learn what it means to be invested in the community, and then that investment translates to relevant learning. So on the new end, it would be service learning project, and then on the all-in end, it would be project-based learning, but we will all be moving in that direction for that initiative on becoming invested participants.
Does this encompass the 4 A's? And will there still be any direct relationships to 4 A's?
Yep.
Or just be part of the whole child?
I'm never getting rid of the 4 A's. I think they're up there. There's one of our strategies. On the student well-being one, 3 of the 4 A's are on the student well-being one as major strategies: activities, athletics, and arts. And then obviously the academics comes in on the accessible learning environment. I think 4 A's is who we are, and we'll never get rid of it. Yep. Still going to be on our posters, and it's going to still be the name of our boat. Yeah. Yeah. Was that you, or where did that come from? Yeah, I love the 4 A's. We use it all the time. All 4 of them are in our initiatives as a group and individually. The last initiative for this priority is to strengthen and expand the PLC process. That was a goal my first year as superintendent, and we worked a little bit on this last year, but it was hard to get our people together. But we want to continue the PLC process, which is giving teachers dedicated time to come together as a group and talk about their students and their needs and their classroom data. And that's the piece where they can talk about what's unique at their school and with their students, and then how that feeds or informs their lessons. And included in that, when you look over at the strategies board, would be the instructional coach. We're trying to migrate our instructional coaches back to just that, being having peer observations and coaching teachers in the classroom and helping them meet their needs, so they will also participate in those PLCs. We've got some schools that are really doing a strong job. White Cliffs Middle School is a leader in the PLC movement right now. We have videoed some of their PLCs and had some of the principals visit and watch them. Desert Willow's making progress. Over here, Kim Patillo's got PLCs going on. So they're at a level at most of the campuses where we really, that organization of time and allowing teachers to come together will continue to be important.
One of the complaints I heard a couple of years back was that they never saw the instructional coach.
Right.
They were just at a data entry and spitting out charts and leaving them in their mailboxes every once in a while. So I think it's really important that our instructional coaches are doing a whole lot more than data.
Yeah, and I think they worked hard all day, every day, but the data had grown to such a level that they were really struggling. So we are, like I said, working to relieve not all of the data because they have to be data informed, but give them time and space to be with teachers. Because that's a huge recruitment and retention strategy also is any opportunities for leadership, opportunities for peer observations, and to work with a peer, and not just the mentor, we have mentors, but a peer coach. So it's a tough one. It's if you ask an instructional coach, they really struggle and they're conflicted on how to balance that time. So it's up to us to make sure they don't have to. Right. The next one is, it's a little bit new. Again, the components aren't new. It's nothing that our district hasn't done in pieces and parts, but tying it together and really making it an initiative was important to us because we had some aha moments, like we all know what's going on, but other people don't. So how do we handle that? And again, you can see it's cousin to number 4 on the current strategic plan. A lot to do with college career readiness. It was born directly, though, from the stakeholder interviews and research. Many parents and most students reported minimal understanding of the details associated with K-12 scope and sequence and what is expected at each grade span and how it all relates to high school graduation, but ultimately their future story. What lacks is the deep understanding of the key milestones. They don't recognize necessarily families, the early warning signs associated with being at risk for dropping out that starts back in 3rd grade, as we all know. The definition of early warning systems, according to the U.S. Department of Education, is a system based on student data to identify students who exhibit behavior or academic performance that puts them at risk. And so that's what, Beth, I was referring to earlier with our new Decision Ed platform. We will have an official early warning system based on data, which will be very helpful. Economic leaders, I'm on a group called Achieve 60. It's a statewide initiative, and then they have community leaders, Cherish Family, I think from Pioneer Title Agency. She's the lead of the local chapter of Achieve 60, where they want 60% of Mojave County or Arizona residents to achieve by 2030. They share a lot of resources, and one of the reports that they shared was that skills that employers value and rely on are changing, and which has in turn created job skills gap. And all industries, or our own industry, is experiencing this because skills are changing. Then the gap in knowledge is changing because we're not keeping up with it. And then higher education is reporting that students are entering college and 60% of them need a remedial college course. So we really need to work on these transition plans and early warning and support systems so it doesn't bottleneck as when they're 12th graders. And then when we talk about military, so for us, we want to really focus on career, college, and the military. And I'll bet I'm going to look at Roger and see if he nods at me on this latest information. According to a 2019 government report on enlistment standards, joining the military is now a competitive job environment. It's not a profession of last resort. That joining the military is not a given. You must qualify to enlist, and disqualification factors are rarely waived anymore. So even that, when we say to our high school kiddos who are looking at, maybe they're not going to college or a career, but they're thinking military, they need to know they've got a score on the ASVAB. That a GED is a disqualifier. It used to be it could get waived, but they're looking for that high school diploma, and they're looking for certain skills. And otherwise, they're going to tell you no. All 4 services. Does that match what you?
Absolutely. It encompasses what you just talked about, as well as you have to be in good standings with the law.
Oh yeah.
And you have to be physically fit. So there's three large components there to getting in the military.
So our kids need to know that, and maybe we need to start telling them earlier. College, career, or military, whatever your pathway, and your pathway may be a gifted pathway or a special ed pathway or a CTE pathway, but there are indicators and things you need to have done, and we need to make sure everybody knows that.
I'm confused about the college or the high school diploma versus GED. I thought that employers couldn't discriminate against one or the other because they are recognized as both. So I'm concerned about that if that is truly what the military is doing.
I'll fact check myself. I read it. I'll send you the report that I read. It talked about GED was acceptable a lot, and then it talked about it as a not always waived disqualifier. So I'll double check that.
Yikes. And yeah, I mean, our counselors need to know one way or the other. I mean, if they're thinking that.
We'll get with our military recruiters. That's what I was going to actually say next. We're going to get with our higher ed learners. I've already emailed Dr. Klippenstein for a conversation about how to get students who are planning college but don't have a university plan yet onto his campus. To get our recruiters, they hadn't been on our campuses as much in the last couple of years, because the other thing this report said was that it's basically full. They don't have openings. I never thought of the military as like having job openings. I always thought you just joined the military, right? But apparently there's they have quotas also. They have a certain budget and so many spots. And so they really don't have the openings that they used to have. So I want to have a meeting with our recruiters to look at a lot of what I read to see what's factual for our kids, Jen, and then get with our counselors and make sure they know.
Yeah, it's in junior high, just like the kids that say, "Oh, I'm going to be a football player."
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you going to be, a professional? We heard that in our student interviews. What are you going to be, a professional basketball player? What's your plan B? Yeah.
Veterinarian.
Veterinarian. That was
Little ones, that was number one.
veterinarian. That's cute. So the initiatives of this priority are created on well-defined pathways at all grade spans, building those early warning systems, identifying gaps by individual student, and then, like other initiatives, having systems in place. So what's really missing is just a coordinated and communicated effort to monitor those systems systematically. Again, we have a lot of them. There's wonderful things going on in our district. So what's also feasible then is working with advanced ed, military, and economic leaders to pinpoint the needs of our community and then align those needs to our system. I talked about the Achieve 60 group that I'm on. The goals there align with part of what we're doing, and that is to increase the percent of 3- and 4-year-olds in quality educational settings. That's difficult because we can't find teachers to teach. We would expand our preschool program, but we don't have preschool teachers. So to get more kids into a preschool setting so they're ready for kindergarten, we're going to have to find teachers. So, our strategy might be something other than just enlisting 3- and 4-year-olds. We've got to find and train teachers. Another goal of Achieve 60 is to increase the percent of 3rd grade reading at proficient level, which is part of our goal anyway. That's the move on when reading part. To increase the percent of 8th graders proficient in math standards so that they're successful in high school math. And I talked a little bit about that earlier, working with middle school 8th grades. Middle school should be pre-high school so that we really are getting them ready for success in high school. And then another goal, and I don't know our current data, it was unavailable when I tried to look at it, is to decrease the percent of 18 to 24-year-olds who are not in school and they are not at work. So I want to say, I'd be guessing, so I'll have to check myself, 16%, something like that. It's a higher percent than I thought of 18 to 24-year-olds are not in school and not at work. We've got to get them, to finish school and into work. So the goal would be to decrease the number in that category, but I don't know Kingman's number yet. I will work on getting that.
Please, I can't find the words at the moment, but there is always the category of house manager. That 18 to 24-year-old
House manager?
house manager, you know, the housewife. Sometimes
House
it's
manager.
the man, right?
Okay.
That's politically correct.
The refrigerator inspector.
I mean, but you know what I mean? I mean, some people, they graduate and then they want to take care of the house. They don't, the household. They don't want to, you know,
Work or go to school?
homemaker. Well, but it's a full-time
Yeah,
job taking
homemaker.
care of the house. So,
Oh, so you're okay.
yeah, I mean, how many couples got married after high school?
Oh, I see. So someone in the home is the economic provider and someone in the home is the finance.
Right. I mean, there
Or
are a lot
the-
of families that have gone back to that dynamic where one chooses to stay home. They choose that one stays home, and that's another category. that-
Right. So we'd have to figure out of that percent, how many are productive in a different way.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Gretchen, how are we working with Mojave Community College when it comes to finding paras, finding Head Start, or not Head Start, but
Preschool.
how they have an early childhood education associates? Are we working with the education faculty there?
I'm looking at Miss Moreski.
I know that we've done some posting and recruiting over there, but honestly, I think that's an area that we can probably do more in terms of building a partnership with the college.
Yeah, just collaboration. You know, I know that they place students in classes to do observations and a mock lesson, those sort of things. So I think we need to be building that pathway with the college. I mean, they're right here in our town. We should be.
I agree, Jen. We do not do enough with MCC. And actually, I'm going to talk about that in the next bullet, but I wasn't going to talk about it related to employment. So I'm going to add that note right now. Yeah, we should be partners in crime, if you will, over everything.
Yeah, those are community members that are looking to get a job in what it is we need them to do, right? So, yeah, I don't know why we don't have, weekly meetings.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd like to see that.
Yeah, their students will do their time in our schools. You know, if you have to do practicum time, I know we have a lot of that, but I don't think we have a formal process. So,
yeah, it'd be great if we had a pathway, that we create those relationships really early on, beyond just with a random classroom that they were sitting in. If they had, communication with the principal, if they started a relationship with some of the teachers in that school, the likelihood of them coming back and being quality teachers for us is increased.
huge. Like if we have someone who student teaches for us, more often than not, then they teach for us. So it's that same idea.
Yeah, we need to start earlier than their NAU student teaching. We need to start at the beginning when they start taking those EDU 101s.
Yeah, the first ones. Yeah. Okay, we wrote that one down with a star. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another thing, kind of on that same vein with MCC, is to collaborate with the advanced ed, military, and economic leaders. We work with Cassie Veru, our CTE coordinator, a lot, and Amy West and the J. Ted Wade leaders to ensure our programs are aligned. But as an example of paying attention to community needs aligned to KUSD pathways is supported by the Institute for Workforce Excellence, a report written in 2019, and then that in combination with our latest census numbers. This is just one example, I think, that we could parlay into a lot of examples. The median age in our area, Mojave County, is 51.6. That's compared to a 38 median age nationally. The 14% population of veterans in Mojave County doubles the national average of 7. The percent of community members with disabilities in Mojave County is 22% 2.6, while the national average is much lower at 12%. And the increase in jobs since 2014 here is 10.4, which outpaces a population growth of 3.5. So you take all that data that I just gave you and you put them together, and you are going to see a retiring workforce in need of health care and fewer workers to meet those needs. So it becomes incredibly clear that what field of occupation is going to be important in Mojave County. It's healthcare. So we've got to not only offer, but market our healthcare programs in our school and our relationship with Mojave Community College, so we can transition the high school students who are earning CNAs and medical occupation certificates into nursing and pre-med pathways. There are a lot of examples similar to this, but this was just so striking to me. We need to move from just having those available courses in our CTE programs to literally communicating and sharing with our community those facts that I just gave you. We're getting older and retiring in Mojave County, and we have a lot of people with medical needs. If you want a job after high school in Mojave County, it's very likely that it could be in the medical field, right? And then we could discuss the same thing in manufacturing with our industrial airport. We've got to work with MCC and the Economic Authority to have these transitions. And if medical occupations is a need, then every counselor, we should be having presentations in high schools or middle schools about this need and say, you want a job when you graduate? This is a great option. And then get with MC. So stuff that we're already doing, just really expand on it. And I love that MCC idea, Jen, because I was thinking of it for this. And if we just get together with them on all of it, I think it will serve our community and our students very well. So those are the effective and transparent transition initiatives and some of the ideas that we need to do in that area. All right, so those are the top 4 priorities in no particular order. And then again, there are strategies that will have, some of them are already adopted district strategies. We'll continue the work that's been doing, but we're really going to focus on the individual student and the individual teacher and how we can support them and their families, in addition to consistency, celebrating diversity, and providing other supports. So any of my compadres, did I miss anything? There were so many voices that have fed this work. I think I tell Jerry every other day how excited I am about wanting every voice heard and everybody on it. So anything, we're kind of moving along. We didn't have a lot of questions.
Where, if I'm moving to Kingman and I come and talk to the superintendent and say, I'm trying to pick a school where my kid is going to be ready to go to college, or my kid is interested in culinary school. So where would you direct me on those priorities to look at? Would it be the effective and transparent transitions part, or?
Yeah, we're going to have pathways. We're not going to have everybody like reading this whole thing. We'll simplify it, for marketing purposes, like was done before. Because I don't want any parent to get overwhelmed.
Right.
But we definitely are going to have pathways. So we envision having like a 1-sheet document that says pathways, and it'll be given to them based on their described need. So it might be a Cambridge pathway or CTE pathways, or we can give them the information on where to go.
Okay. Well, I think this is great. We talked about this with you in November and December, and you said you were already working on it, and the outcome is excellent. I think you and your team have done a great job.
Yeah, it's been brought up before, and maybe it's a good time to reconsider it. We say that the military could be a pathway. So do we want to have an ROTC unit in KUSD?
Yes.
And if we're going to have one, an ideal school to take a look at would probably be Kingman High School.
Yeah, I looked at that a few years ago and I remember learning you apply for it and then they give you the branch that's like up, right? You don't pick your branch. You say, I want an ROTC, and they say you qualify and you get whatever it is. Yeah, I think it's time.
Yeah, that's true. And unfortunately, you're probably on a waiting list. So it's one of those things that need to initiate and get on the list.
All right, would you help me with that?
Sure.
Okay.
Is there a reason that we're considering having one high school be Cambridge, one be CTE? Why do they have to choose a high school to do a pathway? Why can't
Oh, they don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as far as ROTC, we can't have it in both high schools?
Well, I don't know. We'll have to see what they allow. I remember the time I wanted to apply for it. You're kind of at their mercy, if you will. Like, yes, you can have it. We'll give you one. So we'll see. I mean, if we can have it at both. But when we talk pathways, Jen, it will be, an honors pathway or an accelerated pathway, and then it might be at all schools. But we do have on CTE pathways, it is at one campus or the other. However, we've been working with Cassie Veru and talking with her a lot about how to have all programs available to both. Because again, we want accessibility. So the new House bill, and I'm not prepared to come to the board yet because it's big. I'm working on it on the side. It's House Bill, I want to say 2862. I may have the numbers wrong. But it's the one where you can adjust your seat time, right? And you can have credit. You can have instructional models that are other than traditional models. So you could have, for next year, up to 50% of your time can be a variety of other models in addition to the seat time. So in other words, we could have Friday school, let's say, if we had a CTE teacher, if Joe Dorner wanted to do fire science, on Fridays, he could do 4 hours on Friday, which are the same 4 hours they would have gotten Monday through Thursday. And Kingman High kids could come to Lee Williams for fire science, or the CTE teacher could do 4 hours on a Friday, and the Lee Williams kids could go on Friday to Kingman High. So we're looking at alternate models that will give kids on both campuses access to the other campuses' programs. We looked at this 4 or 5 years ago, and it was logistically impossible. But now that the parameters have changed a little bit as far as attendance and seat time, I think we have some more options we can talk about.
And what are students' options that, let's say during the summer they took an MCC class, a math MCC class, for example, of having that math class count toward high school math as well? Yeah. That class may not be a dual enrollment class that they could take during a fall or spring, but it could apply toward their graduation credits.
Yeah, I believe we do that. I believe we do that now already. Any class that meets the standard of graduation requirements. So if they took, let's say, college an algebra or whatever, a regular class at MCC, we would add it to their transcript. And if it, well, although most of those would be dual credit. Can you give me an example, Jen, of a class maybe?
Not sure. Some social and psych, anthropology classes that may not, that would go towards perhaps a liberal arts that would fit into the categories required for. How well is that communicated to students? Because that is a great way to kind of double dip and get to that achieve 60 goal simultaneously.
I don't know that it's communicated particularly well. I know the traditional pathways are the dual credit, or the kiddos who are kind of in the know already because perhaps a sibling did it or a family knows, they just know they can go and do that. But I don't think it's advertised in our registration assemblies, I don't think. So but that would be another example,
maybe as part of our collaboration with MCC, we could do a curriculum crosswalk and find out what courses are within the MCC catalog and what we would accept to check off credits for the high school, and then just especially maybe right before summer or prior to break, say, hey, you could take these courses in the summer and it would count toward your high school graduation.
We did do that with the Bridges program, so we did have some communication there. And Aaron Sherman and I met with MCC about, I don't know, 20 times, trying to maybe have our kiddos on the MCC campus instead of the high school campus. So if they really have run the gamut of courses on the high school campus, as a senior, being considered a Lee Williams or Kingman High student and being on the MCC campus and taking their courses because they fit their life goal or their path better. We were really on the verge of starting that program when the pandemic hit. So I've added both those things to my MCC meeting agenda.
Yeah, I think.
So Mitzi Escrow, a former teacher for KUSD, is now the director of curriculum and assessment.
Oh.
And Tara Dagris, who used to also work at for KUSD, she is the education faculty for Kingman. So we already know these people. So we should be communicating with them.
Yeah, and they weren't in the meetings we had. We were with Dr. Gilbert and
Well, it comes down to if students are going there on their own,
Right.
we check them off, or if we're paying for
Right.
it as a district.
Right.
Two different ballgames.
yeah, the one if we keep them enrolled as ours, we pay for their courses. They're still our kids. We still get the funding, but then we have to out
Two classes
for two, then we have to
funded
output.
for one class
But we
on
can
our
we
dime.
can figure out several pathways. Yeah.
I'm imagining if this would help, especially with gifted kids. You know, like MCC
Or-
has an engineering track, which we don't have.
Well, I know Amy West really wanted to get our kids. We have a lot of kids that don't need any more classes on the high school. And it used to be if you went home at noon, you went to work, but not always anymore. So Amy West with WAVE is really working with MCC to get them into certificate programs in the afternoon. That's another push. So not even just the gifted going the dual credit and the honors route, but kids that were trying to head into the career instead, getting that behind the wheel training or welding or some of their other programs. But yeah, there's a lot of work to do. We're excited about it. Okay, well, this is phase 2 that we're in. It's a big project. Again, there's a lot to do. Our principals will meet on July 8th again to talk about what we go back to the campuses with and communicate with our teachers. We'll be working with Cara Maples, our communication manager, about avenues to communicate our plan to the community. And I plan to give you a quarterly written report, a comprehensive one, so that we hold each other accountable, that we're not just talking about it, but we're actually doing it. Anybody else? Yeah.
So I guess the military recruits on a tier system. The military recruits on a tier system, so like a diploma is a tier 1, and then a GED is a tier 2, and then they only take X amount of tier 2 recruits in a given year.
That's why they said the wave was for the, okay.
It's so the opportunity for the GED students to enter the military creates a more difficult pathway for them to get the same thing as the tier 1 students, is what that article I read.
Thank you. So it puts them on a waiting list almost. It
Or
could.
they have to score higher on the
ASVAB, right. All right, the next, well, that's the strategic plan proposal. If there are any major concerns or edits. And then we'll put the simple marketing one-page one together so that it's not the complicated version. You got all the pieces.
Let's take a 5-minute recess.
Absolutely.
Or 6 minutes before we go to
7-minute
item
recess.
5. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay.
routines. We will continue to remove students and have room disinfection if they're sent home for having a fever or being ill. Devin, we put hydration stations in so mouths aren't on drinking fountains. And we're going to increase the hydration station inventory on campuses. The ionization ventilation systems, I believe, Aaron, they're all complete at this point, or is Lee Williams? Lee Williams is this summer. Super excited about that. Remember, we thought it was sort of a dream, long-term goal, and it's ready for this coming school year. Transportation vehicles will continue to be sanitized after each use. We will continue to limit spectators at large events until otherwise directed. We will continue temperature scans daily, fevers of 100.4 being sent home. We will continue to follow health department recommendations for returning to school and the CDC close contact and quarantine procedures. We had 2 students in summer school at the high school level report positive, so we followed the procedures just as we have all year long, and there were no spread. We made sure there were no students on campus. We followed the CDC guidelines. We will continue to make accommodations available upon request for teachers for things that are in addition to what we're already doing. The plexi barriers will continue to be utilized. We will continue modified visitors policy, limit face-to-face meetings, and encourage mask use as a normal procedure. We'll keep, as far as resources, increasing that technology that I mentioned earlier. Hopefully our goal is 1-to-1 through ESSER. We will fund skill gap programs. For example, we just had summer school on every single campus versus a couple of campuses. And Jerry, you might have sent it already, or she's going to be sending you a summer school report on how many students participated, how many credits were earned, what the achievement growth was. We will, as I had mentioned in prior board meetings, we were very generous in our staffing again for this next year. When Aaron and I looked at the staffing ratios, and Aaron and Angela and I met with the principals, we didn't push toward those limits as much as we would in other years. So we are still under the ratio in most cases. And we lowered the ratio officially, and we staffed with some generosity under those ratios in some instances. And then I believe I'm going to get the confirmation from Aaron. We're still going to have COVID substitutes per campus. Yeah. So there's always someone available. So other strategies that you would like us to consider, this is basically a snapshot of what we already did. We're just going to do it again for another year.
So can you talk about limit spectators at large events? What's an example of that?
Well, we're not going to overfill gyms or stadiums. Like at football games, for example, we'll work with the athletic director to make sure both sides are used and that they space it out in the stadiums better than when there's large crowds and there's people hanging all along the railings and all along the fences. We're going to clear that out a bit.
And how are you going to encourage mask use?
Well, when I say encourage mask use, those who are using masks, we are going to be building that culture and climate where you don't say, why are you wearing a mask? Making it a normal behavior for anyone who has a mask on is what I mean by that. Because we had talked about, I think a year or so ago, that we didn't want people who were wearing a mask to feel ostracized or singled out for wearing one, that we have to build a culture and a climate where it's just a normal event if someone's wearing one.
And how are you doing that?
The bullying.
Well, it's going to be a part of the culture and climate. When the principals have their staff meetings, they'll be talking to their principals about it. If fellow staff members come in or students are in, if you hear someone making a remark, that needs to be addressed so that behavior is modified. It's, school-wide systems of culture climate management.
And if it's the principals that are making those comments?
Well, then it'll come to me. I hope someone turns it into you and you tell me, or they come to me directly. Not the principal, the reporting person.
I think that's, that's going to be your gap when it comes to implementing these things is leadership. And you have some leadership who does not agree with these strategies and side eyes or makes fleeting comments that does not create that culture climate, but the staff doesn't feel comfortable saying anything because that's their boss. And it somehow always gets around who said it, or it's known because you've only got 2 or 3 teachers who wear masks, so it's pretty easy to figure out who that is. So I think your culture climate needs to start with your leadership.
Okay, thank you.
And with the Delta variant increasing right now, we don't know what this next year is going to bring. And being ready with full on
Yep.
the COVID procedures. Yeah. I know I was getting complacent myself, but I'm glad to see you're not. We need the schools to continue these procedures.
Any other? Okay. The other item that we were going to talk about were board meetings, I think.
Is it an agenda item?
It's an agenda item in the PowerPoint. It's part of we had said we would talk about during the strategic planning, so I added it
Okay.
to the Return to Learn Guide, board meetings and
Components.
uniforms
Okay.
agenda item.
Oh, is it me? Are you looking at me to
Yeah.
lead this discussion? So as far as school board meetings, we had discussed at our last regular board meeting, do we want to move the meetings to 4:30? And there was a little discussion that it may inhibit some of the public coming to the meeting. It may be a good move for our staff because they can come directly from school to the meeting. And we were going to discuss that today.
And I did speak with the lawyer about a couple of things regarding the board so that I could come informed today.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be an action item. It can be something that is established by just consensus in the workshop. And if you need to have it become an action item for a vote, then obviously it would go on a board agenda.
Okay.
But you could make a decision as a board according to Ben about that. And then the other thing that I talked to him about was live meetings versus Zoom meetings and people coming in on phone calls and how that's working at other boards across the state, or people moving back to live meetings. I would like to see us move back to live meetings where we're not having phone-ins and Zoom-ins. Really easy to hear you and talk to you, Jen, so it's not anything personal, but he said that we could discuss that as well and come to an agreement. And if there's not an agreement in here, then it could become a board item.
Okay.
At what point do we go back to the traditional live meetings?
Yeah, I would like to do that as soon as possible. I mean, I like all of us being in the room. I think it's more cohesive and good for the district. I don't know how everyone else feels, but
I think we need to keep the Zoom component and phone, because just like before COVID, there would be times when somebody couldn't make it if they were traveling or whatever, had whatever schedule got in the way.
Right.
So having the Zoom or the phone option worked for, like I didn't have a conflict today, so I made sure I was here in person.
Right.
But so I think the lean is that we do it in person, but we still leave the Zoom and the phone option.
I think that doesn't need to be our normal anymore. I think that we need to move to strictly live meetings if someone is traveling, or there's always going to be an exception with 5 schedules. Star does her best to try to get us together and polls us to see when we can have meetings. Sometimes it doesn't work out. That's understandable. But I think as far as our normal events, that we need to go back to having our live meetings. Our IT department can stream the meetings on YouTube like we were before versus the Zoom.
Does it have an effect? Can I ask?
You can ask whatever you want. Yeah.
Does it have an effect on financially or anything else if we're doing YouTube versus Zoom?
Yeah, so I mean, technically the Zoom portion is just to bring in our board members that can't be present live. If those board members are present, then we would just do the YouTube component and we wouldn't need the Zoom component at that point.
Are we have a charge for the board meeting Zoom part?
We do for the amount of hours that our workshops go. We are capped, so we do pay a component, a small fee for licensing for students.
I don't think it's a financial situation.
But I don't think it's, yeah.
No more than you pay time is money and you pay staff for their time. And so if you're dedicating their time to Zoom meetings, guaranteed Zoom meetings, you're electing to pay for that, essentially. You pay staff. So if you say do this, you're paying for that.
But the Zoom itself.
Is exactly what he just said.
Yeah, it does have a licensing fee associated for using it.
It costs, it's just a matter of doing business through Zoom.
Right. I mean, like we can do, a private individual can do a Zoom for up to so many people, up to so much time, right?
Correct.
Free.
Right, that looks a lot differently in a school district after a whole year of using said service.
Right.
For sure.
Right. So is it a high amount or is it pretty nominal or?
Yeah, in my opinion, it's a reasonable amount for what I see.
20K, right?
Yeah.
40K?
20 is what
Oh,
it said.
20. Okay. But that's for the whole school use,
Correct. That's
not just for board meetings.
Yes.
Okay. So because we have still this COVID strategy and procedures for the schools, I think we need to still allow this for the board.
Right. I think as a district, and I could be wrong, but I think when we get back to school, we're going to ask administrators to come to school board meetings, not do it via Zoom. And I think that, like we said, it starts with the leadership. We're the leadership. I mean, we need to set that example. I think we need to be in a meeting and available to
I completely
staff.
agree that it has to do with leadership. And for that reason, we have to allow those people that don't feel safe to have the option. We can't say everybody funnel into this one room. I'm surprised no one's asked me why we should keep doing Zoom. We've had a whole 5 minutes conversation and I'm the one that keeps coming here to Zoom. So surprised it wasn't, hey Jen, why do you attend board meetings via Zoom instead of coming into the board? Probably because you already know the answer. Because I'm looking on the screen and no one's wearing a mask. No one is following their own guidelines that we just approved. So
what guidelines are we not following, Ms.
well,
Shannon?
I mean, those board members, I think there's what, 2 feet maybe between Lucero and Jax. So this is what I'm saying. The reason that we are using Zoom, have used Zoom, and I think we should continue to use Zoom is inclusivity and accommodating those that feel a certain way and want to make decisions based on the information that they've been given. We are saying we are going to afford staff that. We also, as a board, should reflect that. Perhaps 10% of our staff and students feel that they need an optional way of participating in school. It doesn't seem odd that 10% of our board wants that as well. In this case, 20%. Well, right now it's more than that because Carol and I are both on Zoom.
I would have a problem with starting to say that we're going to expect principals and stuff to be here in the room when the room can't handle that many, even at 6 feet apart, and maybe some of them can't wear masks and aren't vaccinated. Because it's a double standard that we're talking about here.
No, I don't believe it is. And I don't disagree with what you're saying, Jen, but teachers are going to school, kids are going to school, principals are going to school. They're all doing school live, and then there is the online option. So to have the principals come to a live board meeting, I don't think is not practicing what we preach. I mean, I have a principal here. Do you feel unsafe?
Excited to get the email from Gretchen today saying, here's the slide slideshow I'm gonna present to the board. And we'll review it later unless you'd like to show up. And when I saw that last line, unless you'd like to show up, I was like, yay, I get to come to an actual board meeting.
Yeah, I didn't let them come any of the whole last year and a
I am
quarter.
vaccinated and I did get COVID, but I just think it's a personal choice, and I think most of my colleagues will want to show up.
So I didn't want you to think I was forcing them to come, Beth, I guess was my point.
I appreciate that.
Encouragement that Charlie was just saying was where I was getting the, not you.
Well, and I think they're probably going to elect to attend. Maybe that's the better word.
I would imagine, but I still think that we need to leave that option open of the Zoom. If we're going to have these, if we're addressing the whole district with these strategies, we need to continue the Zoom for the board meetings until we don't need these strategies anymore. Just for courtesy, for, who knows, you could hire somebody in October that needed to be on Zoom and not in person, but did want to participate. We could have public comments still that need to be on Zoom. Their child's in the online, or an online teacher needed to make a statement, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it's district-wide that we're paying for the Zoom anyway, our board meetings are not costing us anymore.
So there would be a reduction of cost, depending on what our decision was. You have a licensing that could come down if we're not using it in the classrooms anymore. Number one, if we were using it for bigger meetings such as this, you could decrease that renewal cost.
Right, but
Money's not the issue at all.
Right.
Huh?
Money, we're
I
not
don't
going to
think it's-
assign, we wouldn't make a decision based on money. We would put safety before money.
So
Okay.
essentially the question is, do we want to force people to come in front of our faces? That's essentially the question, because it isn't about money. It's not about accessibility. As a matter of fact, it's more accessible to more people to provide Zoom. So it's about reducing accessibility. So what is really the question here?
I don't think we're forcing anyone to come to a meeting. I think that we're recognizing that we were elected to serve the district and our community. We're still going to stream the meetings. For a citizen who does not want to come to the meeting, they can view it on YouTube. So I don't think we're forcing anyone to come to a meeting. We're just asking our board members to come so we can work together as a group and not be disrupted through technology.
Well, we can't have a conversation about important things outside of an actual formal meeting. Obviously, we're having a conversation now. So what do you want to talk about? What I had for dinner the night before? I don't understand what it is that you feel you're lacking by me being over here.
Your beautiful face, your personal presence. I don't know. I think as group dynamics work, we work better together live with discussions. When we're sitting here discussing issues today and you're giving a comment or a suggestion, it's difficult when you just pop up and give your suggestion when you're not recognized by the chair, or someone else may want to say something, but you're taking the lead in that. So that's one example.
And that's no different. I mean, that's how I was in the board before. What I'm saying is we need to be accommodating. And we say that we care how all, capital A, capital L, people feel, students, staff, teachers. especially as we navigate, hopefully, our way out of this, I think we need to be inclusive by providing this opportunity for all.
I think it's been a good discussion to get it out in the open and talk about it. And we all have our different opinions on it. For me, I agree with Dr. Lucero that it's good to have the board in person where we can see each other, react to each other verbally as well as with our eyeballs, and work together as a team, but also understand where other people are coming from, such as Jen.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that I think that we need to keep the Zoom this year still. Keep it, allow it as a part of our board meetings, though we will try to be here in person. I'm doing that more.
I would like to make a comment.
Yes, hi, Carol.
It doesn't make any difference what you do as far as I'm concerned, but I just want to make the comment that according to open meeting laws, a speaker is supposed to be recognized by the president.
Thank you. Yeah,
Dr.
I think,
Lucero?
yes.
Thank you.
I think we will move on. It's obvious that there's some disagreement, which is fine, so we can include it with on our next board agenda. As far as the time of the board meetings, can we do that as a consensus? As far as okay. So does the board want to move the board meetings to 4:30? Do you want to keep it at 5:30? Does anyone have any thoughts?
I have a conflict every Tuesday at 5 o'clock.
You do.
So I miss it when I'm here at 5:30, and I'll miss it when I'm here at 4:30.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't matter for you.
It's easier to catch it. It just, sometimes I can catch the first part and then be here at 5:30, but it's a problem no matter what.
Okay. Do you have any comments, Roger, on?
I'm open either direction, 4:30 or 5:30. I see benefits for both as we talked about it. As far as schools and when they get out, it seems like all the schools could be here by 4:30, so I don't think that's probably an issue. There's some advantages as far as school activities that take place in the evening at 6 or 7 o'clock, that they could attend the board meetings and still get back to their school activities as far as our administrators go, our principals go. So I think there's some advantages to that. So I'm okay with moving it to 4:30.
And Dr. Dorn, did you talk to staff members or principals?
They're kind of like what Roger just said, fine either way, but most of them felt like, and you can ask the one that's here, on the way home from work rather than waiting is a good thing. Yeah.
I think then if it's okay with the board, we can post our next meeting at 4:30. And if we see some issues or have some, then we can discuss moving it back, if that's okay with everyone. Jen and Carol, is that okay?
We're not taking, are we taking a vote?
No, we can do just a general consensus.
Okay, I'm fine with it.
Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and do that. If you can let Star know, Gretchen.
Okay.
Thank you.
The other item that I had on there, and this is just kind of came up during our stakeholder interviews. It didn't filter into an official strategy because it is going to be a board conversation and decision. I think it would take a little more investigation and conversations with principals, board members, and parents, and that is the school uniform. We heard from quite a few stakeholders about the uniform and asking us to revisit uniforms at KUSD. So again, I didn't put it into any of our initiatives or strategies because it's kind of a big conversation, but I thought it should go start the conversation on the next board agenda, but I wanted you to hear it during strategic planning because it is important to a number of people on both sides. We heard a lot of keep it elementary, get rid of it secondary, get rid of it all, keep it all. It just seemed to be a topic of conversation, so.
I think, Dr. Lucero,
Yes,
I think it's
it's nice.
really important conversation, but I think it also opens up a conversation about our dress code policy in general, and I would love to have more conversations about that.
I so agree. So yeah, that's why it wasn't in the plan, but I think Board Member Shumway and President Lucero, I would like to put it on a board agenda for discussion for you as a board.
Okay, that sounds great.
Dress code and what Jen said, dress code and the whole thing.
Okay.
But Roger's like,
The whole thing.
I mean, you could just keep it the same or, but I would.
No, it's going to be a difficult situation to deal with. I spent a number of years as a high school principal without a dress code for students, and then all the years here with a dress code. And they both really have their pluses and minuses. It's going to be a challenge either way.
It came out in the planning process, so we should talk about it.
I was just gonna say that dress code made a big difference when I was in junior high teaching for the kids. It was a big deal. And I'll talk more about that but I mean, another way to solve it is to have girls' schools and boys' schools.
All right. So anything else? We're at the end of the agenda. I will, unless there's any further questions or discussion, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. And
Second.
second, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.